What was the wildest way you found out you were being cheated on? NSFW. My entire friend group knew about it, and I only found out after the one real homie blackmailed her into admitting it. And when she did, it was the most insincere shit ever. It's no big deal, everyone else thinks it's okay. And stuff like that. Suffice to say, I got my ass out of that relationship and friendship group real quick. She demanded to read all the messages on my phone. I said no problem, but only if I could read the messages on hers. She had forgotten to delete a message from a guy saying all we ever do is fuck, can't we hang out sometime? There was nothing on my phone. Date night cancelled day of. I decided to make it a guy's night to see the new Marvel movie at the time. As we entered, I saw her sitting at the theater snuggling up with a guy. Our seats were a few rows back, saw them kiss a couple times. When we all left at the end of the movie, they were exiting their aisle as we walked down the stairs. She absolutely froze when she saw me. Blocked her on everything while I'm in parking lot. I was visiting a dying relative in hospital, so could not attend some stupid college party he and his roommate organized. I told him I couldn't go and asked him if he could come over later, after visiting hours in the hospital, because I knew my relative would die soon and I really just needed someone to be there with me. He said he probably wouldn't be able to, as he needed to help his roommate with party preparations, but would come over later if they finish early. Next day I saw pictures of him with his ex in his lap, kissing, uploaded the previous night by his roommate. The roommate even knew we were dating. He was just too drunk to realize he added me as a friend a week earlier on Facebook and I would see the pictures. Not really wild, but my ex-wife and I owned a small business together. One day I noticed a strange email address on the office computer. Her first name and a different last name. I realized that email was still logged in, so I took a peek. I found 2 years worth of emails between my ex and some dude she dated before me. So I printed out every email and had it bound in a binder ready to present to my divorce lawyer. Too recent to relive, but here's how it went. Got a random text on Insta asking if I'm up, and new ex responded saying yes. She literally replied saying congrats, your girlfriend is sleeping with my boyfriend, followed by a barrage of screenshots she had gotten from her boyfriend's phone. I found out because my, now ex-wife's affair partner's wife called me. My ex had been sleeping with a married man, always said she was a lesbian, but he had a breakdown when my wife cheated on him with his, also male, best friend. So he told his wife, who messaged me on Facebook, then called me, sent the screenshots and told me everything. Ex ruined 3 marriages all at once. Takes a long time. But eventually you realize you deserve better. Was married. It happened a week or so after my 2 weeks R&R, was in the middle of a 12-month deployment to Iraq. Long story short, I hadn't cheated on her, but I sure as hell got diagnosed with a STD a week or so after I returned back to Iraq. We finalized our divorce a couple of months later while I was still deployed. Happened to my cousin too. Came back from deployment, got a STD and confronted wife about it. She confessed to sleeping with multiple men. I knew he was doomed when he called to tell me he was getting married and joining the army in the same sentence. My colleague had an elaborate wedding, cathedral ceremony, hundreds of guests, to a guy she'd been with for years. She found out shortly afterwards he'd been cheating because they met this girl, who was his colleague and gym buddy, when they were walking in the park, and their 2 French bulldogs, who were noisy and protective, didn't bark at her at all. There was no reason for her to have met the dogs before, as she had never been to their house to her knowledge. So she snooped on his phone while he was asleep, and apparently he had been cheating for over a year and she was pregnant, and they were opening a business together and he was leaving as soon as he had the whole thing set up. When the dust settled, the only thing she was pissed off about was the expense they and her parents had spent on the wedding. He could have called the whole thing off and saved thousands. She didn't learn though. Her second wedding was nearly as elaborate. I went on a 2-week holiday, and when I returned he was acting really strange. I tried to ask him what was wrong and why he was acting off. He started an argument with me, told me I was too young and insecure, asked me to leave, didn't want to see me again. I left sobbing, totally confused. 9 months later I see him walking through the city with his ex and a newborn baby. Ah. Now I understand. Edit. Thank you so much for all the love and the laughs you've given me about it in the comments. I was 18 and he was older, so of course I was smitten. It stung at the time, but I got over it. It's a funny story I tell at the bar every now and then. He did me such a favor. I'd have probably got stuck in my hometown if I'd stayed with him. Life is so short, throw yourself at it and appreciate every feeling you get. We broke up, and then her best friend and best friend's husband told me that night. She had been fucking a few different people but settled on one. They got married, had kids, then she cheated on him with me one night years later. I didn't know they were together. They divorced, she remarried, got divorced, and now she is on husband number 3. My favorite part is she portrays herself as an amazing Christian woman that is better than everyone because she is so Christian. Came home off a deployment. Now, ex-wife was acting really weird, but I figured it was because I had been gone for a year and everything was just taking time to get reacquainted. About 3 days after I returned, I had a notice from my unit stating my vehicle had 3 tickets at another base. We were in Germany, a few hours away in the past few months. When I went in to find out what the deal was, all 3 had photos attached to them for speeding through a checkpoint. All 3 had my wife and some other guy. She was kissing him in the 3rd pic, he was driving my car. I was out with this girl I'd been with a few months. Went to a nice restaurant for dinner and stopped at a local dive later to hang with mutual friends and coworkers. I went into the men's room later to see her legs under a stall and heard a coworker's voice saying "suck that dick." Left the bathroom, went directly to bartender and had her split our check and paid mine and bounced like fucking Tigger. Game over. My dumbass loved her. He told on himself. He randomly called me saying why I messaged his ex, and I was super confused because I never did, and told him it's a misunderstanding, I can reach out to her to explain it's not me. He got super defensive and threatened if I reached out to her we're done. I found it odd and reached out to clear my name, and she spilled saying he's been cheating on me as well as playing her and multiple other girls all at the same time. Turns out one of the girls made a fake account of me and reached out to her. Never found out who it was, but this is the one time I'm glad having a stalker worked in my favor, otherwise I would have never known, haha. Kind of reverse similar story for me minus the fake account, but I was the ex. Got an angry call from ex's GF and him in the background saying to stop contacting him, he doesn't want my ugly ass, etc. lol. I most definitely had not, and was mega confused. Turns out he was cheating with someone from my area that would often call, and when they were together he'd ignore. Caller ID had location and no name, and I was the only person he knew from that city/state supposedly. When she pressed him, his excuse was it was his ex harassing him, me. Almost a good license where I lived was far from him, so it was plausible that it would be me. Except for the fact his lie resulted in her/him needing to call me and tell me to stop, obviously, because if it's true, why would he care if she did? Of course she would. Told on himself. I easily proved to her it wasn't me by having her pull the call log back up and see that the number didn't match the number saved under my name if she actually checked my contact info fully. She apologized to me for being mean initially and broke up with his ass. My colleague had an elaborate wedding, cathedral ceremony, hundreds of guests, to a guy she'd been with for years. She found out shortly afterwards he'd been cheating because they met this girl, who was his colleague and gym buddy, when they were walking in the park, and their 2 French bulldogs, who were noisy and protective, didn't bark at her at all. There was no reason for her to have met the dogs before, as she had never been to their house to her knowledge. So she snooped on his phone while he was asleep, and apparently he had been cheating for over a year and she was pregnant, and they were opening a business together and he was leaving as soon as he had the whole thing set up. When the dust settled, the only thing she was pissed off about was the expense they and her parents had spent on the wedding. He could have called the whole thing off and saved thousands. She didn't learn though. Her second wedding was nearly as elaborate.